down at the B1 level, and one of the firefighters said, I think you'd be interested in this, and they pulled off a big block of concrete, and there was like a little river of steel flowing. Down at the B1 level, and one of the firefighters said, I think you'd be interested in this, and they pulled off a big block of concrete, and there was like a little river of steel flowing. Down at the B1 level, and one of the firefighters said, I think you'd be interested in this, and they pulled off a big block of concrete, and there was like a little river of steel flowing.
Seattle, Washington. On a September night, 20 engine companies respond to a 4-alarm fire at the vacant Blackstock lumber warehouse. The blaze appears to be isolated in just one wing of the building. But in a matter of minutes, it becomes one of the largest fires in Seattle history. Matt Johnson and Bill Meredith are two of the first firefighters to get inside.
Jack up here!
We decided to explore what appeared to be a second-story mezzanine type of area. While I was up there, there was a tremendous release of heat from somewhere.
The roof has exploded into a 5,000-degree wall of flame.
I'm out of air!
2 stories below, Matt and Bill are overwhelmed by a blast of heat so strong, they're almost baked alive.
Go on, Bill, give me some grab.
The lack of oxygen and tremendous heat leave Matt unable to move. Bill goes for help, but becomes disoriented within the blaze.
I've been hot before, but I've never experienced that. I've had my ears blistered, but this was something else. It was like being x-rayed with heat. It was absolutely stunning.
Bill manages to find his way to safety. However, Matt Johnson is found dead in the rubble. He was 32 years old, married, and the father of a 15-month-old son. To Seattle fire investigator Dennis Fowler, the blaze seemed similar to others set by an arsonist that he had been tracking for years.
On a scale of 1 to 10, he's a 10. As far as his skills and his abilities go to bring a building down. You can't put them out. And the reason you can't is because they generate so much heat and energy that a hose of water simply cannot overcome it.
Dennis first suspected the work of the arsonist when Seattle's 40,000 square foot carpet exchange warehouse burned to the ground in just 19 minutes. The heat was so intense that it literally boiled concrete and vaporized steel beams.
The firefighters themselves said that it was hotter than they had ever experienced before. And this guy's wearing state-of-the-art firefighting protective clothing, and they're still outside. They've got hose lines and they can't get near the fire.
After this fire, Dennis Fowler and the Seattle Fire Department analyzed dozens of others across the United States and Canada. They found at least 20 fires which looked like the work of the same person. They called him the King of Arsonists. It was believed that
I think they totally fucked up and used a little bit too much thermite.
Here you can see some silicates which have boiled up out of the concrete from the high temperatures that we have with the thermite.
What was the problem again? My area of expertise is in the area of the materials characterization of new materials. And that is being able to identify the properties of materials we've never seen before.
Judy Wood ironically doesn't go near the thermite samples even though unknown materials is her field. She also does not bother with the molten rock formations, kept at local museums. I emailed the NYPD museum and they said no one has bothered to look at any of their rock formations and insist that they are compressions from the pancake theory.
Expected, but the giant silo complex...
Hi everyone, my name's Eric Tuccio. I'm 32 years old and I'm a scientist. I got my master's degree in polymer science and my bachelor's degree in chemical engineering, and I'm also employed as a scientist. But when I tell you that I'm a scientist, I don't mean that it's just my job or what I studied in school. I mean that this is who I am. I take it that seriously, and that's actually one of the reasons that I'm here, is because to defend my profession. And I'll get back to that later. But as a scientist, I also have a responsibility to be here because 9/11 and what brought the buildings down is a science problem. It's a science and engineering problem. If all of the people that died that day had drowned, there would be a plumber here. There would be a whole bunch of plumbers. There would be a plumber here sitting here talking to you, and I'd be far, far away. Another reason I'm here is that I'm an American citizen, and that I take my responsibility as an American citizen seriously also. And this country of ours is made up of people that vote, and they need to be kept informed, and so they can vote, in accordance with reality. And elected officials, they also need to know what really happens so that, they too can, make decisions based on reality. And the last reason I'm here is I feel terrible, just like we all do, about what happened that day. And I know I didn't lose anybody personally, but I know personally it was close to me. But people from my town died. I'm a science fair judge every year at the high school in my town, the Westfield High School, and outside the gym where the science fair is, there's a plaque of a young man who was the best basketball player that ever came out of Westfield High School, and he died on the planes, one of the planes. And at UMass, on the bottom floor of the Letterly Graduate Research Tower, there is a picture of a man who also died on the planes that worked on the computer department. And so this affects everybody because these people that died were our neighbors, and people from all the different countries, died that day, and that's what affects them too. So basically it affects the whole world. And I'm also a citizen of the world, so it's another reason I suppose I'm here. And I'm also the kind of person that gets pretty angry when people die for no reason because of senseless, ridiculous violence. And so I'm sort of equal parts sad and angry about that day. And out of respect for the people that died, and for the people that are forced to press on, I've chosen to be here to speak with you today. So my message is pretty, short and sweet, really. It's, what I have to say is basically that, if I told you that last week I had breakfast on the moon with Osama bin Laden, you would say probably something like, hey, that's crazy, and you'd be right. Or you might say, hey, talk sense, man, that's impossible. And I'd have to correct you, and I'd say, no, actually, that's not impossible. There's nothing stopping me from having gone to the moon. And there's nothing stopping Osama bin Laden from having gone to the moon last week, and we could have had our waffles and come home. And I could be here sitting here talking to you. There's nothing impossible about that at all. And so why am I telling you that? I'm just trying to illustrate that there's a really big difference between something that's unlikely or improbable and something that's impossible. Like, now I can roll the dice and get cat's eyes 100 times in a row. You know, that's unlikely, but it's not impossible. Whereas, you know, I can't ever roll the dice and get a 13. You know, so that's impossible. So, you know, why am I telling you this? Well, you know what else is impossible? Melting steel with jet fuel. You can't do it. It's impossible. You'd have as much luck melting steel with ice. Like, imagine if I brought you a big steel beam and I said, oh, I'll give you $1 billion if you can melt this. And you'd say, okay, sure. And I said, okay, but you have to do it with this bucket of ice. You would just laugh at me. You'd say, that's crazy, that's impossible. And that's sort of obvious because ice is very cold and, you know, jet fuel is very hot. But, you know, let's say that, you know, I gave you a lighter, like a butane lighter, and said, well, try it with this. I'll give you $1 billion. You might be inclined to try. Say, well, that's pretty hot. I'll do it. Maybe it'll work. Turns out it wouldn't work. It's not hot enough. It's just not hot enough. Now, let's say I said, all right, I'll give you all the office furniture. Anything normally found in an office building. You can burn it. Just set it on fire any way you want. And you can try and melt this steel beam. You might try that. That wouldn't work either. That's not hot enough. And then, you know, if you try it with jet fuel, it too is not hot enough to melt the steel. So what's the point of all this? Well, the point is that when the 9/11 first responders, after the building came down, when they went into the pile, to, you know, save you and your neighbors and your family, you know, because they didn't know that you weren't in there. They just go in there to save anybody that's in it. They don't care who it is. When they went in there, they found a lot of molten steel. They found steel beams with metal dripping off the ends. They found elevator shafts with large pools of molten steel at the bottom of them. They found parts of the pile that they described as being like a foundry. There was so much molten steel. And the problem is that, unfortunately, the official scientific explanation for what brought the buildings down can't account for even 1 drop of molten steel. Because there's nothing normally in an office building or on an airplane that can melt the steel. That could melt even 1 drop of steel. Not like, you know, aspects of the pile being like a foundry. I mean, like 1 drop. If you found 1 drop of molten steel, there would be no explanation for it. So what's that mean? Well, you know, as you know, you, the listener, have these 3 options. Okay, you can reject bulletproof scientific laws that have never been violated in 200 years, you know, since they've been known about, and say that it was the office furniture and the jet fuel that melted that steel. Or you can say that, you know, the first responders are not heroes. They're actually Al-Qaeda operatives lying about the existence of the molten steel. There actually was no molten steel, and they're Al-Qaeda operatives trying to throw you off the trail. Or your third option, you can throw out the official scientific explanation. So when you're given those 3 options, and when you realize that those are your only 3 options, then you might be wondering, you know, how did the official scientific explanation come into being? Well, the way that that happened is that there's nothing scientific about it. You know, if you were doing a scientific investigation, either, you know, forensically after the fact, like, you know, if a house burns down, you go and you try and figure out what to do, like what happened, try to determine what happened, or, you know, through experimentation, you just want to know about something scientifically, so you do a bunch of experiments to try and figure out what's going on. What you have to do is, in either case, you collect all the observations and you base your conclusions on all the observations. What you can't do is look at only the observations, or you can't base your conclusion on only the observations that support your conclusion and then reject all the other observations that don't support your conclusion just for the sake of having a conclusion. You can't do that. Because that is not science. That's fraud. And unfortunately, that's exactly what happened. None of the 9/11 first responders' testimonies was included in the actual report or to guide the analysis for what they were going to test for to try and determine what happened. You know, if they had done that, they would have said, hey, first responders, what did you see? Oh, we saw molten steel. Oh, well, we better do a whole battery of tests to find out what could have melted this steel, because Lord knows jet fuel and office furniture can't melt the steel, so we better do some tests. None of those tests were done. And to make matters worse, all the evidence was destroyed. All the steel was sent away, destroyed. There's no evidence left to test. So, long story short, the official story is a lie, and the people involved are actually criminals by way of scientific fraud. You know, there's nobody, and nobody in this world, scientist or no, that can stand against anything I've just told you. Nobody's going to come in here tomorrow and melt steel with jet fuel, any more than they're going to melt it with ice. And I mean, I don't know how many smoking guns you need to convince yourself that the government is lying to you. But this is the only one I need, and I don't need to know anything else. I mean, I don't need 20 smoking guns. I mean, I need one. This is all I need. I don't need anything else. I don't need to spend, weeks learning and, doing, like, that's all you need. You just need what I just told you, and that's it. You can't melt steel with jet fuel. How'd all the molten steel get there? Done. How hard was that? If you need to convince anybody that maybe there's something to this 9/11 truth movement, then just tell them that. There's nothing anybody can say. You'll have the truth on your side.